Hello, this bright and sunny day. I'm going to move the camera so I should be able to look into the camera. I'm feeling a bit fragile. Firstly, I've been quite ill to be honest, but also on a more positive note, I've reached the subplane of the fifth dimension. Not an easy task, and I think since then I've been feeling a bit fragile and having to readjust a lot of things. However, today we're going to have a little talk about a film that I saw. This is an interesting story because it combines lots of things in it. I saw this film on Netflix, I think it was last week, about a nun, I think it was a foreign film, a nun who fell in love with a priest. And it was a foreign language. She was very pretty and he pursued her, and of course eventually they had sex, which is disastrous for both of them because they both were vows of celibacy really. But the whole film was about her feelings, I guess, really, and it ended up quite sadly because the minute they got back to their, after they'd had the sex on the seafront, he drove back to her abode, jumped out of the car and left her sitting there. She was devastated. She didn't know what she'd done, and it's a very strange thing. But I've been in a similar situation, perhaps in this life, but in the 17th century, when I was in Italy and I was a nun and I had one of these little bonnets. And I fell in love with the priest. I fell deeply in love with him, but he didn't love me. I think I've mentioned this in my previous videos. He didn't love me, and I was so dreadfully hurt, but we didn't have sex, which was a saving grace probably. But I think I felt guilty ever since then, wondering, well, I didn't feel guilty, but I just felt guilty about my feelings. You can't control your feelings. And there is something quite fascinating about a Catholic priest who celebrates. I think it's the robes myself. But anyway, so this film, it just brought up all these feelings. I thought, gosh, I've been through that. I know what she's going through and I began to sort of analyse it, and I'm quite good at this psychology of sex business because I've been through a lot myself. And I suddenly realised she decided to confess to him. She couldn't cope. He was the priest, the confessor, and she sat in the confessional box and talked to him about her feelings, and he was sitting there I think he felt a bit guilty, but he was not kind of the same intensity as she was. That was interesting. He just said, well, you have to have happiness where you can, which is true. I mean, all this guilt stuff is because of their conditioning and the rules and all that thing. But ultimately, I felt that it was sad really because God had given them a gift of each other to share this wonderful sexuality, and they both felt a bit guilty about it. They spoiled it all. And I thought, why couldn't he have spoken to her or shared her guilt or something? But of course it seemed to me, and I've just realised it today, which is why I'm doing the video, that she was carrying his guilt. A lot of abused people do, a lot of people that have been very difficult. The men are very clever at this. Women don't dump their guilt onto the men so much, but they are very clever at transposing their guilt onto the woman. There's a teacher called Barry Long, and I went to one of his lectures many years ago, and he had this theory, I don't know how to say a theory or not, but he had this teaching that actually during sex, men do actually transfer their feelings, their emotions onto the woman. Men are not terribly good at holding their emotions and how carrying with their emotions, are they? They're not very, in my experience, they're not terribly emotional beings. They're perhaps becoming a bit more so, but generally, that generation particularly, they were very repressed, and when they had the sexual exchange with the woman, they left her with all their emotional feelings. So she carried all this guilt. Not only the guilt, but the tears, the sadness, and she wouldn't know why, but this is why women cry a lot after sex, probably. They're carrying this extra burden. Then men get mad with them because they're upset. It's a ridiculous thing, really. I mean, it's very, very hard to understand. But it going right back to Egyptian times, when the man used the woman to take her crown chakra sex. He used to lie with, not sexually, but she used to lie with his head in her lap, and he would take the energy from her crown chakra and use it for himself. And I think we are still meeting these men who take the energy, and women are getting tired of it. They get exhausted. I'm not saying all women. This is just my experience, and this particular film that set it all off. It just seemed to epitomise my time in Italy. And I know this being now, he's actually a spiritual master, and that's another story. So we have met again in this lifetime, and I think I've mentioned that he actually came to ask for forgiveness. But it's a messy business, and it's all this celibacy and all these rules and regulations. Goodness sakes, get on with it, But it's the guilt, and the way he sat there and just listened to her confession without offering any help, any support. In the end, I think she had to leave the convent because she couldn't live with herself, and she's probably carried that lifetime and through to many lifetimes, and I think a lot of us do. I don't know, I won't go into my own story, but this guilt thing, and I think, well, hang on a minute, whose guilt is it? It's probably the guilt of the other chaps. They're running around scot-free, finding somebody else to dump on. The women are left, holding their baby literally sometimes, alone, and carrying all this extra burden of the man's guilt. It's a very emotional thing, this, for me, actually. I don't know how it's been. I haven't been well for a couple of weeks, and I thought how all these thoughts, and I'm thinking I must do a video. It was odd, the film. It just triggered off all my memories, and still working on it, actually. So, and I thought, shall I do it? Because doing a video about, well, I haven't done that about sex, but it's a subject, isn't it? I'm thinking, is it wise? There'll be more. There will be more. Anyway, dear, I'm going to leave it short today because I'm not very well. I've got a terrible attack of vertigo, and it seems that people don't watch the whole videos anyway. So I'm going to leave it there. 7 minutes, about enough. And take it what you will. Take care. God bless. Love you lots.